Joe Biden in a basement is good for Joe Biden's campaign. Because if you put him on a stage, it's a negative, right? He's incapable of getting through a teleprompter. He would get lost at this table.
Yes.
I don't say that as glibly. It's just,
sad.
It's sad. I feel bad. He can't get through basic things, and yet he's the leader of the free world, or whoever's pulling the marionette strings. Trump locked in a courtroom for 5 weeks while he should be campaigning. That's really good for them, because he can bring that message to people. People understand what he's saying. It resonates with them. He's able to bring people over who would not have otherwise been able to, or would have ever voted Republican. He's one of the few guys that can do that, sort of expose the left for what it is, expose what we're talking about, break through the noise put out there by the mainstream media, break through the noise and sort of the manipulation of big tech. Those are $1 trillion industries that are functioning as the marketing department for today's Democrat Party. And to be able to single-handedly sort of break some of those walls down, if I felt like if I was in charge of that, if I was in charge of the Democrat side, we'd be winning elections 99.9 to 0.01,
Exactly.
And yet they're still close. I think our messaging is there, and I think it's really important. Perhaps, honestly, the stuff that they've done to my father, our family, perhaps it's the most important thing to happen to America in recent history, in that it's exposed just how bad it is.
I think
you can't hide from it anymore. It's not like, I get it. Like, you come home from a long day of work, you're trying to feed your family, you're listening to 5 minutes of, Brian Stelter on TV. It's like, well, there's got to be something to it. During the early campaign stuff, if I watch TV to hear about myself, I'm like, man, I hate me too. Yeah. It's so bad. People feel it every day. They're not going for it anymore, and I think it's why they're watching you here or me on Rumble or whatever it may be. They're going to other places to hear an alternate viewpoint, because the machine just isn't delivering anymore, and it's so unreal.
But the machine knows that, and the machine exists to perpetuate itself. That's the only point, is to maintain power. Mm-hmm. These are incompetent people with no other prospects in life other than running the machine. So,
not all of them are incompetent. When I see what tech is doing,
machine running.
When I see what tech is doing, though, you even see it now, because I see, the algorithm. It's like, it'll show me just enough of what I want to see, but never promote anything else. On my Meta platforms, I haven't grown in 3 years, and yet everyone that comes up to me, hey, you got the greatest Instagram I've ever seen. So the people who are already following me will see my stuff, so it appears. It's almost like it's AI designed to let you think you're not being censored, or that you're able to see the stuff that you want.
Oh, I'm aware.
But they're preventing that growth. You're well aware of that. So
yes.
The evolution of that is making it harder. In 16, 17, 18, when I was starting to get censored by, let's call it Twitter 1.0, they're like, well, how do you know you're being censored? I was like, well, because yesterday I got 7,500 retweets on a post. Today I got 3. And it's, I do my own social. When I hit that button, I know what it's going to do. I know when it's, okay, that's a decent post. I know, that's hot. That's going to go big. And it's like when it goes big for about 30 seconds, and then it's like, just, you see exactly what they're doing, but they're coming up with better ways to make it appear as though they're not censoring, while still, continuing to perpetuate and push, the ideals that they espouse and value.
No one interfered in the last election more than Mark Zuckerberg.
Or Google.
Or Sergey Brin. That's exactly right. So, but let me ask you, the convictions come down 34 yesterday, and your father goes out there and just basically raises the middle finger and says, we're going to win anyway. And within hours, Benny Thompson of Mississippi, who's a monster, Democratic congressman, says, introduces legislation to pull his Secret Service. Yeah. So basically they're saying, okay, we'll kill you now.
Well, they did that a while ago also. If he goes to prison, we want to pull his Secret Service. So basically, if we put him in a cell, we're going to put him in a place where he could be murdered.
But that's a death threat.
Of course it is. But
from a member of Congress.
Again, should it surprise us? I mean, you look at half the congressmen, get in their faces, make them feel it. I mean, they can say these things, and they are lauded as heroes. If we said something even remotely like that, we're literally inciting violence. I mean, those words are violence, Tucker. We've seen this. The double standard that's out there. I mean,
But how hard is it for you
Congresswoman after Congresswoman. You have a Hamas caucus, in Congress calling for, the death of people in the Middle East. It's, well, that's okay. You can't do that. If we did something similar, we'd be blocked. We'd be off of every platform. We'd be canceled. And, again, different games. We're playing two very, very different games.
But that's so threatening. Tony Fauci he doesn't even work for the government. He's got Secret Service protection. He walks in the dog park in Washington, D.C. I happen to know for a fact because it's my dog park, former dog park. And he's got, 3 guys following him, but they want to pull it from your dad.
Yeah. Well, look at what they did with some of the justices, the Supreme Court justices, right? I mean, you think that they'd be able to do what they've done to Alito even this week, we're going to make him recuse himself because his wife hung a flag upside down. I was like, well, she can't express an opinion. What they've tried to do to Clarence Thomas, what they did as it relates to Gorsuch and others, it's insanity. If they did that to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, if they were picketing in front of their house like they did Amy Coney Barrett, that would be a serious problem. Those people would go to jail.
Of course.
But, we'll let if that's the conservative justice, we'll let them suffer a little bit. We'll make sure but it's effective. Because then you see some of them, and some of them are a little weaker than perhaps their principles, and they're it's a little bit. Maybe I got to go a little light on this one because it's not worth the headache. I mean,
when the Democratic Party's militia shows up outside your house, it's happened to me.
Yeah,
people are intimidated by that.
Of course, and we see it across the board. It's designed. The Hunter Biden laptop, that's Russian disinformation. And here's 52 intelligence officers signing off on it. Oh, it must be. 4 years later, oh no, it's actually his laptop. There's no accountability for that either. But they're like, well, no, we're admitting it now. It's like, no, but you got exactly what you wanted at the time. We understand there's no accountability for it. That's election interference as much as anything else. Also, there was the stat, I think it was 17% of people said had they known about the Hunter Biden laptop, it would have changed their vote in 2020. 17%. That's a lot of votes. And yet, that was the gospel. And if you said anything about it, we've had the conversation about, Wuhan lab leak theory. No, of course it didn't come from the lab that studies the question that we fund. It came from the wet market 3 feet outside of the lab. And if you believe otherwise, we're going to pull your funding. If you're a doctor, you'll lose tenure if you're at a university. You won't, Fauci's going to not sign off on your grants anymore. And even if you're like, but you don't have to be a scientist. They're like, Don, how would you know? You're not a virologist. It's like, you don't have to be a virologist to know that it happened there. You just have to not be an imbecile. You can have mid, double-digit IQ and be like, of course it came from the place that studies the exact virus question that was at ground zero of where it released, and not from 4 feet outside of that. It's insane. And yet, think of the truly intelligent people in positions of power in medicine and otherwise who went along with this blindly. Because, it was easier to do, and, there was a lot of money, and, we're just not going to pass up on those things. Kind of hard to do
that now, though. Everything that's happened.
This isn't all that long ago.
Right, but I do think at this point, if you're still telling yourself those lies, you are lying to yourself. You are a liar.
But it doesn't matter. They correct it years later, but they got what they needed out of the ruse.
Right.
Right? They got what they needed. And again, because there's no accountability after the fact, it doesn't matter. They'll do it again. And they'll make it the gospel for 6 months, or, I always said, the difference between the truth and the conspiracy theory is 6 months.
Yeah.
Now it's like 6 minutes, but they'll still get what they want out of that 6 minutes, use it to manipulate whatever they need to. And, I don't see that stopping. I see more people being awake to it, right? That 6 months moved to 6 minutes because people are not just blindly buying the BS anymore.
So how does it play out from here over the next 5 months? They tried to put him in prison. They're still. Do you think
we got to overwhelm the margin of fraud.
So it's just to ask. It's July 11th is sentencing.
July 11th. So by the way, you think that's a coincidence? That's 4 days before the Republican National Convention. Do you think that's a coincidental timing, or do you think that's designed to throw a wrench into that? Yet another coincidence, right?
But what happens if can they remand him and put him in jail then?
I imagine they will try, right?
Why wouldn't they?
Yeah, of course. Does anyone think? And again,
that's too far.
That's too far. Nothing's too far. And again, until it happens, we have to stop giving them the benefit of the doubt, thinking they're going to act above board. This is an arm's length transaction. No, it's not. What are you talking about? There's not a single aspect of this case that should stand in any court. But where do you appeal right now? To the New York Appellate Division, which is just as radical? And it's not just this case. Look at all the shade, all the craziness around Fannie Willis, right? That case. You look at Jack Smith and the FBI doctoring documents and setting up staging photos and then leaking it to the Washington Post. The classified documents that end up on the front page of the Washington Post. That's fine. Each one of these things wouldn't stand. If we did this to, meaning conservatives, some sort of Republican did this to Obama, it would never end. It would be a perpetual story, and rightfully so. And yet, hey, as long as it's against a conservative, as long as it's against Trump, who's up against that machine, we're going to allow these things to happen. It's not like one of these things doesn't have any serious hair on it, right? They're all shady as hell, and yet it doesn't matter. And our mainstream media almost refuses to cover it. They won't talk about these things. My father, in many cases, is gagged. I mean, think about that. I mean, First Amendment is kind of the First Amendment, right? It's a big one for us. The former president of the United States is not allowed to talk about the facts of the case because, if people actually heard that from him, they'd realize just how much, BS is in all of these things. That should trouble a lot of people. You think it stops with Trump? Think about that. I mean, if they can do it to arguably one of the most, out there, most powerful people in the world, a bank account to be able to fight, a base to push it, venues to be a soapbox to speak from. If they can do it to him, who can't they do it to? But more importantly, if they will so flagrantly and so corruptly do it to him, who won't they do it to? That's the question we have to be asking. Is anyone safe? And it's like people going blindly along. No, it's going to be different this time. I'm like, really? That's what you've got out of this?
But if they put the Republican candidate who was leading in the polls, all things equal, he becomes president again in November. If they put him in jail right before the Republican convention on fake charges stemming from a rigged trial, they're kind of pushing violence, aren't they?
Listen,
how do they expect people to respond? Nothing like that has ever happened.
In the reality, you have to be careful even how you talk about that.
No,
right?
They are pushing.
Well,
violence.
they are. They clearly
violence.
are. But again, nothing should surprise us, right? The star witness of this case is someone who lied before every branch of Congress, was disbarred, lied to banks, lied to wives, lied to the press. But we're expected to believe that he actually told the truth in this one instance, right? That's who they hang their hat on because it doesn't matter. When it's rigged the way it is,
freaks me out.
It doesn't matter.
We're moving toward something ugly, and I don't want that.
No one does. But they're not going to let it play out. Do you think they'll ever take their foot off the gas? No, it's not. They've gotten away with it for years.
How should people respond, do you think?
I think, honestly, the reality is everyone has to get involved.
Yeah.
And again, it's both sides. You have to have, people, running for office. And I'm not talking about president or Congress, or run for your school boards. That's perhaps the thing that's most important to me. Frankly, there's a component of me that I don't want to win the presidency if we don't have Congress and the Senate, because I'll probably be up on charges again, and we'll get to go through impeachment, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and, for the next 4 years. I don't think that's a great place to be, but I think, apathy has caused us a lot of problems, especially on the conservative side. Where, hey, we run businesses and we do these sorts of things, and we want to spend time with our families, and all noble things and important. But we have to take the initiative to get involved at every level of these things, because the left has taken over every major institution in our country that controls. What they've done in education, manipulating our children, what they've done in entertainment, oftentimes the same thing. It can't stand if we actually want to have a future. Our kids, they graduate, there's high schools with higher districts, no one can read or do math, but they know the 4,376 genders. And I imagine since this interview started, there's probably another 15 that I haven't included that, so I don't want to be labeled as, whatever, a gender bigot by not including them, but that's the last I've been able to keep track of. We just live in perilous times.
It does seem kind of heartening. I think he raised more money in the hours after the verdict than anyone's ever raised. How much he raised?
It's over, I think, $38 million that, in the first couple hours. Small dollar donors, and then there was a bunch of big dollar donor stuff. That's what's interesting. There are tech VC guys, respected guys, that, Hillary donors and even probably Biden donors that are like, okay, I've seen enough. Stroking, 6 and 7 figure checks now, because I think people who are watching closely enough truly understand just how far we have fallen, just how close we are perhaps to that fulcrum point where there's a point of no return, right?
Yes.
And I think if we ever let it get there, there's no question in my mind that the Democrat elite, they'd maintain and seize that power, and it'll happen like all sort of communist nations, and that's where we're at. And I think people see that, and people who may not even agree with Trump on everything. And you don't have to agree with Trump on anything. I obviously agree with him on everything, Tucker, as the dutiful son. But
it's reached a level of principle, though.
Yeah, but it's like, again, name a metric where we're better off under Joe Biden. We're on the brink of World War III with the world's largest nuclear superpower by volume of nuclear capable ballistic missiles. Like, I don't know. We're going to keep funding that. We're okaying a guy that was a former weirdo actor to send the U.S. made missiles into Russia, provoking that, I guess. And maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's the next distraction, right? COVID was a distraction for 2020 to allow them to manipulate things. Maybe World War III is the distraction, for this election cycle.
Some of us called this a year ago.
Yeah,
the senile man can't win. They're going to bring us to war. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I don't say that lightly, but I also don't say it I don't know. Would I be at all surprised? Not even. I think it's lunacy. I think it's crazy. But do I think they would do it? 100%. 100%.
Do you think, last question, but it's just, and I might be skipping ahead, but I don't think we're far from. Well, we're at war with Russia.
Oh, of course.
If we're targeting
that whistleblower talking about the boots on the ground, I mean, I've never seen a whistleblower disappear that fast in my life.
Yeah, you wonder
I wonder why, huh? It's almost like it's happening.
But they would need, the military's in very tough shape, and recruitment is way down. No one wants to join the training military, understandably. Now they're talking about, well, who would, right?
Well, why would you? Who's gonna? The guys you'd want fighting a war for you, good, patriotic, red-blooded Americans. They don't want to go report to Trans Admiral, not because if the Trans Admiral was Patton, maybe they'd do it.
Yeah.
The Trans Admiral ain't Patton.
No.
Okay. The Trans Admiral is only an admiral because they're trans, not because they're competent or capable, and it doesn't matter.
It's grotesque.
But a big part of signing up for that and possibly dying for your country is actually believing in the things that you're fighting for. That's the basics of patriotism.
That's exactly.
And if you don't believe in those things and you understand that you're going to be vilified, you're going to be forced to not learn how to shoot but do diversity training. Why on earth would you do that? I wouldn't.
And that's the problem they're facing. And so, the one solution was take illegal aliens and put them in the military, so we could have
or flood our borders and put them in the voting roster, and that's another way to make up power because you've lost other demographics that were reliable voters.
But they're also talking about the draft. You're hearing that all of a sudden. Well, maybe we need a draft.
Yeah, so we can be in never-ending wars. Again. What no one's articulated to me, and I kind of do this now, feels like for a living, no one's articulated what does victory in Ukraine look like. I don't know what it means.
I don't know.
Is it just perpetual death of Ukrainians and Russians until they're all wiped out and BlackRock comes in there and takes over all the farmland? I mean, is that what it is? Because feels like that's what it is to me.
They're already selling off land in Ukraine to foreign investors, and they will flood Ukraine with third world immigrants, and Ukraine will not exist in 50 years. There'll be no Ukrainian nation, and we betrayed them like no other country ever. But I just ask you, would people actually serve in a draft?
I'd have a hard time. Honestly, the metric I use for this is not just the recruitment numbers, but the amount of guys that I know, I shoot a lot and whatever, the circles are tight, that are fourth generation Army. They're like, I would beat the crap out of my son if he decided to, these are guys that, their entire ethos is around that military background. They are great friends, and they're they wouldn't even think about it. They disown their children if they joined this military today. And that's sad.
It's the worst thing
that's scary.
Well, Godspeed. Thank you for that.